Hello! In this video I'm going to show you how to make this sock right here with your 60 peg 1/4 gauge customizable oval sock loom from Cindy Wood Looms. If you do not have this loom, you can use, this one's old, the 60 peg 1/4 gauge circle loom from Cindy Wood. The shape is the only thing that's different. This one right here I made on this loom. The second sock I'm going to make on this one. The reason I'm going to use this one is I do what's called a Kitchener cast on. I'll show you that in a few minutes. And it goes like this across. And then on this one, it'll go, same way. There's less distance here than here, making it much easier to close the toe up at later on in your project. Another thing I like is, as you can see, I have all kinds of little markers on this loom. I have markers for where my toe is, my decreases and increases for my toe, and then I have the markers for the heel there. Then I have markers for my ribbing all the way around. With this loom, all I have to do really is mark my beginning peg and my texture, which is I'm doing a 2x2 ribbing. So we'll go ahead and do that. You know what? I'm going to do the light blue. Okay, so basically start anywhere on the loom and mark 2 pegs, skip 2, 2, skip 2. This is what your loom should look like. I am going to mark the side I am starting on so that I won't get confused when I'm going in the round, because I have these pins and normally you can use those to reference a single round. You can also remove the other side if you would like. Let's cast on. I'm just taking the tail of the yarn and wrapping it around the anchor here just a couple times to hold it in place. Once you get a couple rounds done, you can remove this. So what I'm doing is going up and over peg 60 and then under and over peg 1. From here you're just going back and forth. Peg 59 over peg 2 over, and you're just zigzagging all the way to the other end. Something else that I like about the oval loom shape is on these ends here, it's very, very crowded on a round loom to get this back and forth. I'm at the other end. This is what it looks like. As you can see, the yarn is going in this direction. Going to knit over this first stitch that locks all of this in place, and I'm pushing down the stitches some, especially this back side, so that these don't pop off. When I make my socks, I use something called reinforcing thread. This is completely optional. Some people love it, some people don't, but you see it has like some elastic stretch to it. So it's basically like a little elastic strand that you can run with your normal yarn to help reinforce, to make stronger certain areas. Typically when it's used on the toe and the heel of a sock because those are the most common places to wear. I run it through the entire sock. It's gray. If you look close, I turn it a certain way in the light, you can see the gray in with the other collars. Now, I suggest going maybe on Amazon if you're looking for reinforcing yarn. I'm not sure the best place to get it. Where I got this, they don't have it anymore. So I'm not much help for that, and I apologize. Anybody have good suggestions for where you can get reinforcing yarn at a reasonable cost? Please post in the comment section below. That would be super helpful for not just me, but a lot of other people. The way I look at it, I spend so much time trying to create these socks. I want them to last as long as they can. The working yarn is behind peg 31. My reinforcing yarn is just looped over it, and it will just be considered part of this stitch that's already on there in your next round. So you hold all that together over top the next stitch. This is peg 32, and you knit over. Your next stitch. At peg 60, we're going to do what's called a wrap and turn. You wrap over the front, behind the back, and over the front of peg 59. So peg 60 is going to have your original stitch, which is wrapped around here for now, and then it's going to, you knit over that, and that's locked in place. Work back to peg 32. Peg 32, go ahead, work it. 31, we're going to wrap and turn, going back in the other direction. Work 32, 33, all the way to 58. Peg 59 over the front with both strands in the opposite direction, so you wrap and turn. Do this back and forth until you are over here and all of the pegs have 2 stitches on them. You're over on this side. That last peg, wrap and turn. Go ahead and knit over. So you should have 6 on each side that have the 2 loops. That is the end of the decrease, which is meaning it's making it smaller. We're starting from our toes. So this right here is the Kitchener cast on. This is your decrease. This is what you have created so far. It looks much different on here, but that's what you've created. Now to go, flip this over. Now we got to increase. Then we'll start going in the round. To increase, you work to your very first peg on this side over here. First peg we come to that has the 2 stitches on it. Take both the stitches up with your loom tool and knit over. You turn and go in the opposite direction. From here, you work back and forth until you have one stitch on both sides that still have the 2 stitches on it. Now you're going to work to peg 60. You'll take both those loops over and then continue working in the round. And there is a video down in the description if you need more help with gauging. But if you get the same gauge as I do with this, the body, 75 rounds, just your flat stitch. If you want more stretch, you can use the U-stitch or the true knit stitch. Some people call it the reverse purl stitch. But you can use any of those and that will give you a slightly larger stitch. I go, instead of going straight across, sometimes I do if my tension's really good and I can just do it real fast. But I find it, for me, I like to wrap it kind of just behind knit over. I don't tend to get stitches that are too tight that way. When the body of the sock is as long as you need it to be, come on back, let's do the heel. To help myself keep track of where I'm at, I put a stitch marker every 10 rounds. I actually made these ones. I went to Michael's and bought the charms in the little class. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. And then I have one that's a 5 on it that I put in between. So there's my 75. Before we start on the heel, I want to show you how to finish up this cast on edge. Now this is a Kitchener cast on. You start from the opposite side of your cast on string. So you want to come over here. Let me zoom this in a bit. When doing this, this is something definitely take your time with. It's not difficult, but it is something you don't want to rush. So you're going to go all the way over to this edge, and you'll find like the first loop, and you kind of tighten it a little bit, and you go to the next one, tighten it, and you're going to be doing this all the way across. Now with using a wool blend yarn, it wants to kind of stick to itself. So if you go really fast, you could felt little bits of it and make it a lot more difficult. I keep my hand underneath of it so the strands don't get tangled up. Helps it go a lot faster as well. And I hold this strand while I'm tightening that one. Let's see. These stitches right here. You can kind of watch and see how tight you're making it. When it's done, maybe you can see a little tiny indent in the sock, just a bit, but once it's washed you won't even notice that. I do my seam on the bottom of the sock so that the top there is no indent, nothing if you accidentally get it snagged up some. It is time to do the heel. The heel is done the same way as the toe. The only difference is Instead of doing our decreases and increases on this side, we are doing them on this side, from here to here, here to here. Now, this is my round 75. Keep working back and forth until all of these pegs have double stitches. That is the end of your decrease. Before I start the increase, I mark the first and last stitch of the decrease. So I mark both of those and both of those. Work the increase until you have one left on each side. Work one round. This part right here is optional. One thing I do when making socks, let me flip this inside out, is I reinforce the heel while I am making the sock. This does take away from how stretchy the heel is, but it really seems to strengthen it and you get 0 heel holes. This is what it looks like inside out. The way we do this is, if you look, this is where you will start. Here's where you will end. You're going to do a crochet chain. See these bars right here? You will be picking those up all the way up, which the way the heel did, the color change happened in the perfect place, so the stitches are showing pretty good. Like that. And on this side, let's go ahead and start over here. Sometimes these first 2 stitches can be a little difficult to see. That's why I mark them. It really isn't necessary. You do not have to do the whole area. The biggest part where you get your heel holes are up here, right up here at the top. That's the biggest issue with heel holes. If you want, you can start up here much closer and get a few done and have just a little, you know, a couple inches of little extra reinforcement there. So, get both the stitches on there and I can take that out. What I'm going to do is pull this loop through this loop like that and pick up the next bar, pull it through, pick up the next bar, we're up at the top, which there's 2 stitches on there. I will be just treating those as one. I put the stitches on and pull that off, pull it through, and then this might be a little tight. I put those stitches back on the peg. So you'll have 3 little stitches there. this is what it looks like on the loom when that's picked up. I like to go ahead and add a stitch marker here. Just mark my first round. Right here is where you are in the progress of your sock. Work 10 rounds of your knit stitch of choice. The cuff itself is done with a 2x2 ribbing. That's how you have your loom already marked. I like to use the ones with the bands on them as my purl stitches because to me the main part of most things I knit is a knit stitch of some kind of knit stitch. So these are marked, so I know I'm doing something that isn't what I normally do. That's how my brain works with it. But I ran this as long as I could before I did the bind off, and I got 125 rounds. Work your 10 rounds and come back for the cuff. Round 11 through 125, we'll be doing your rib stitch. So you will knit 2, purl 2, which you take loom tool through the top of the stitch, working yarn under, pull the working yarn up, and put that new stitch on the loom. I'll show you again. Let me zoom into this. Loom tool down through the top of the stitch on the peg, working yarn underneath and pull it up through the bottom of the stitch. Then you pop the stitch off the loom and put that new loop on. Do this all the way around. Work till round 125, then I'll show you how to finish off the cuff. I highly recommend marking. I mark every 5 to 10 rows that I do. To count your stitches, you count the bars back here. So I'll start with this gray one. We go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then there's one here, 6. And then the loop on the loom is 7. So what I do is I mark every 5 rounds. At this point, you have 2 different options for how you want to take this off the loom. Number 1, if you like the length as it is, you can use, I would suggest a super stretchy bind off. I'll put the link to that specific bind off in the video description below. Or what I'll be showing you is how to do the cuff, which I'll show you what the inside looks like. Let me flip the whole sock inside out here. Right here is where we folded the cuff down and bind it off. I used a Kitchener bind off. Before we do that, I gotta remove some of these stitch markers. I wanted to show you what it would look like if you have your stitch markers every 10 rounds. It just works so much better for me, and typically if I'm making a pair of socks, I will leave these on here. If it's a long cuff, I would leave those on as well. That way I can double, triple check, because sometimes even while reading a pattern, right here's a good example. This is at the top of the heel. This is where I'm starting my cuff. Typically, I'll do 10 to 15 rounds before I start the texture here. So I have to have that wrote down so that I remember, okay, so this is 10 or this is 15, and then num 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 num. And here it is, inside out. I'm so loving these stitch markers. My 3 is backwards. But I will actually leave these markers on the sock when I'm making a pair, typically. That way I'm able to double, triple, quadruple check that my measurements are correct and I don't screw up and have 2 completely different size socks. We're going to be folding this cuff in on itself. So it's time. Start taking all these stitch markers out on the cuff, and I got the 2 stuck. You want to make sure the ribbing lines up. So here's my first set of purl stitches, and I'm just going to follow this line all the way to the top. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do 2 stitch markers and mark these first 2 stitches. That really helps you be able to see how the stitches do line up. If you want, you can do that all the way around the loom. The color I'm using is, I'm in a gray spot, and your darker colors are much harder to see. So I did go ahead and mark the 2 stitches of the ribbing. You will be picking up 2 stitches in between as well. If you want, you can mark every single stitch. I just did the ribbing ones. I would advise against danglies if you do mark these the way I did. These are our first ones, so make sure I got the stitch markers there. Line that up. Our first few will be the most difficult because it's not really hooked, so they want to kind of pop off. So let me zoom this in, make sure the yarn is coming from between these 2 pegs, or sorry, make sure it's coming here. You want it, this is the last peg I worked, so here's the yarn this way. But keep it out of my way, wrap it around the anchor peg. Alright, let's do this. So here's my first one. You can use your loom tool to pick up the stitches and put them on there, or you can just use the pin, the stitch marker itself. You can even go all the way around and do that, and then pick up your in-between stitches. You can do it like that. And then what you would do for your in-between stitches is, oh, I'm not sure how well this is showing it. I'm going to try to zoom in a little more. You will see there'll be 2 stitches like right here. So I pick those up and put them on. Do that all the way around the loom. Alright, we just have the actual Kitchener cast off. We can pull the sock through and move this out of the way. This is what you got right now. I can unhook this, wrap your working yarn around the loom 2.5 to 3 times. I am doing 3. Actually, I got a little over 3, but that's okay. Here's the first peg we will be working on. Now what you're going to be doing is peg 1, here's stitch 1, stitch 2. Peg 2, stitch 1, stitch 2. Okay, so peg 1, we're going to take your tapestry needle and go down through the top of peg 1, stitch 2, and pull that through. You want the string on the other side though. You don't want it going around behind. All right, I'll get this. There we go. Now we are going to take the tapestry needle, put it down through the top of peg 1, stitch 1. And that's what it looks like. Take your tapestry needle up through the bottom of peg 2, stitch 1. You're going to take the tapestry needle up through the bottom of the stitch on peg 1, stitch 2, which is right here. You might need to separate them some. You want to go up through the bottom. If you have a sharper tapestry needle, that does help. Alright, do this again. Up through the bottom. I want to get the whole stitch. There we go. And tighten that up. You repeat this all the way around. It's 4 steps. So I'm going to peg 1 into, well, peg 1 is completely done now. You will not be putting any more, you will not be altering any more stitches on this. So peg 2 is now your first peg. So step 1, take tapestry needle down through the top of the stitch, peg 1, stitch 2. Step 2, take the tapestry needle down through the top of the stitch, peg 1, stitch 1. Step 3, take the tapestry needle up through the bottom of the stitch, peg 2, stitch 1. Step 4, take the tapestry needle up through the bottom of the stitch, peg 1, stitch 2. Tighten it up. Oops. I'll show you one more time. Now, our original peg 2 is completely done. So peg 3 is now our peg 1. Take your tapestry needle down through the top of peg 1, stitch 2. Tighten. Take your tapestry needle down through the top of peg 1, stitch 1. Tapestry needle up through the bottom of peg 2, stitch 1. Tapestry needle up through the bottom of peg 1, stitch 2. I go ahead and weave my end to end, which this cuff is, hollow, So what I do is I just run this up through. I'm running it on that inside and bringing it through that same side. There we go. And I can cut the strand. And when I stretch it, it's down inside there. This cast on string here. I didn't stick it down anywhere particular, just a really close stitch. Flip this inside out. Which all I'm going to do is go up and down through a few of these stitches. With this being a wool blend, over time it will felt to itself essentially, and all these little ends will just blend in. But I do leave a little bit of a tail so that it gets stretched and it'll stay more on that inside. Here it is. Got a finished sock. It hasn't been washed or anything yet, but look at this. And here's the other one, which this one has been washed, and I'll show you something. If you look at this one, I don't know how well the camera's going to pick this up, but there are differences in the tension of some of the stitches. So right here you can see a little, and how there's a couple spots a little bigger here. That's just where I was either knitting tighter or looser than normal. Well, the bumps up, or I was knitting looser than I normally do. With having carpal tunnel, my hands will start to cramp up, and I'll do that. I'll knit much looser, or if my hands are bothering me, I might accidentally be tensing up and knit tighter. Don't worry about that. I mean, it still looks awesome that way, but look at this. Once I washed it and kind of stretched it, no, I didn't like stretch it like that, just kind of stretching it out like this. And these are Jeremy's socks, so I had him try them on, make sure they fit, and that helps stretch them. But the stitches do even out and smooth. I hope you guys enjoyed this pattern. If you have any questions and comments, leave them in the comment section below. All the information, PDF, tools, all that is in the video description below. And do remember, your toe and heel are completely adjustable. So if you don't want a boxy toe like this, then you increase more. Actually, I have it the wrong way, sorry. Instead of this being the increase for the toe, you'd want to go in a few more stitches to have a more narrow toe. And the same thing with the heel. The heel is pretty narrow that I made. I like the way everything sits when it's narrow like that. That's personal preference. But if that's, just too small for you, don't decrease all the way to here for the heel. Go back a few on each side, 2 or 3. Alright, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and that it was informative. And don't forget to like the video and share and hit the subscribe button. And then hit that little bell. Make sure your notifications are turned on so when new videos come out, you will be emailed directly.